I'm Alfonso Winker.
And I'm Trina Olson. And together, we're the co-founders of Team Dynamics.
And this is Behave.
Alfonso, I'm so excited. Today we're going to talk about all things work and the internet.
I'm fairly active on the internet.
Lots of corners of it, I would say.
Yes, I've got some accounts.
Yeah. So when we were talking about this is in sort of our long-standing conversation that we have with each other, that we have with clients, that we have when we're bringing on new team members. Really just this broad conversation that for the first time in the American workplace, we have more access to information about our employees if we start poking around on the internet than we ever have.
That's for sure.
It's nerve-wracking to me. So the reason we think this is timely and we think our Behave listeners could really get into it is we know a whole lot of people are building teams, are part of teams, and are really active on the internet in ways that maybe they wish their employers couldn't see.
Yeah, and I think there's also this broader sort of pop culture conversation happening right now too, around in a time when we can access years long ago information or things people may have said, or people have had accounts since they were teenagers, and sort of what does it look like to have boundaries and accountability and clean up around what might happen on the internet. So folks have talked, in the last few months about Kevin Hart, about different folks that have been hired on SNL. And I think there's a conversation that workplaces are wrestling with around what happens when we have a connection via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and what have you with someone that works with us and for us.
Right. And we know that the platforms of technology are always changing. And we actually know that those platforms always have really different purposes. And so whether you're seeing somebody's TikTok or their Snapchat or their Instagram, you're a little amazed I knew all three
I was
of those.
like, really started with TikTok. Okay.
Thank you.
I would have gone Facebook first.
Have one of those, but I think they're funny when I
Yes.
see them. So what we want to talk about is let's just take our listeners through the conversations that you and I have, because it's a living and breathing conversation about our own self-awareness and boundaries with how we do and don't want to use access about information, whether it's staff or it's clients or it's potential clients, what we do and don't look at and why, and what we do and don't make of that, right? So we've always said culture really has three elements: patterns that we use to make meaning, and from those meaning we decide what's appropriate or inappropriate. And there's this conversation that's happening that's not just across generations where people are really missing each other, but it's this idea of what even is appropriate to have on the internet. And so it reminds me actually of our episode about gender and dress codes in the workplace, and that we said there's just this increased gap between people wanting to really experience and express freedom and then feeling really buttoned up at work. Now that we're seeing people have to create multiple accounts of everything, because what's the public account? What's the private account? Whose fault is what if I see it? I think it gets a little tricky. So let's kick off by you talking about what you have seen, what you have witnessed, and then what you've decided for yourself as a leader and a manager when you think about all the access you could have about everybody who works for us on the internet.
So when we talk about culture and that the aspect of appropriate, I think context is really, really important. So you and I are close enough in age that we've had a bunch of really similar experiences and different experiences when it comes to participating on social media, posting things on the internet, etc. I am of an age where Facebook was starting just as I was beginning my undergraduate experience.
Right.
So the only way to get on Facebook was to get signed up using your .edu email address. And then the thing that happened after my freshman orientation of July of 2005 was everybody grabbed the paper list of people that we got and started adding everybody.
Wow.
So I overnight had hundreds of friends on Facebook, most of them who were strangers to me. Yeah. But what was appropriate was to be connected, to be friends, in air quotes, on Facebook with the people from your class.
Right.
So you could start forming groups and sharing information and connecting with each other. So when we think about a volume of or a behavior of adding people as your friend, and that really turned into, in my 20s, this thing where you would friend someone as soon as you met them.
Yeah.
So the idea, there wasn't a lot of pause. So the pattern was I met someone, or I'm going to be meeting someone, or I'm in a group with somebody, or I've gone to class with them, or we're doing an internship together. So the pattern was meet or be near or in the proximity of someone and connect to them on your primary social media platforms.
Right. And you and I experience this now. It's just different platforms. When we finish a training, if we walk out of a room when we've done a keynote, all of a sudden there will be all of these requests, right, to connect with us, whether it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Twitter, people.
Sometimes LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. So this idea that it is in certain circles seen as the easiest way to connect and follow what somebody's up to. So it really is with great intent of connection, but we see it more and more that folks want to see everything we're up to, even though we may not ever have met them or remember them because they might have been sitting in a room of 300 people.
Right. And so when I think about where I'm at today and where sort of our work is as a manager, as someone who does a lot of public speaking, I think I pretty quickly just accept invitations from people. So what started as a pattern of in the 2005 time when I was beginning college of you just add people, that pattern just got in me. So it is not surprising, inappropriate, disrespectful, jarring in any way to like receive some sort of request to connect via Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. I think increasingly I start to wonder what kind of access would I want people who I'm not really in relationship to have. But when I think about appropriate, inappropriate, being connected to colleagues, loose acquaintances, etc., feels appropriate to me, but it does give me a lot of pause around what I would ever share.
Yeah. So what's the difference between what you share on like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram?
There is a really big difference.
Yeah.
My bio, actually, my professional biography used to read, Alfonso is a really proud millennial with a carefully curated social media presence.
It did say that.
So
yeah.
I had mentors in my early career who really talked to me a lot about personal brand.
Yeah.
Teaching young people about personal brand was like super important. And they said it was important to curate this experience, be connected to everybody was sort of the message, but curate it knowing that that's there forever and it's going to reflect on you personally and professionally. And so when I think about what I post on Instagram, it's a lot sillier. It might be me dancing with a drink in my hand.
Yeah.
Whereas things that I post on Facebook might be more reflective, might be just sort of pictures of family and friends, like here's my general goings on. And Instagram I think of as sort of curated for people who know enough about me to get sort of the context of what is going on in my Instagram story.
Yeah.
So I think what became appropriate in the context of culture for me was sort of broad-reaching connection with a lot of consideration for what gets posted depending on who I know is part of that audience.
Right.
And for you, I know we sort of treat our social media a little bit differently.
Yeah. So when I was going to college, the internet still wasn't a trusted source of any kind. I didn't have my first cell phone till way after college, so I was in my first professional job. And so I had a really analog childhood and then have figured out digital as an adult. I'm not afraid of technology. I just don't understand it until somebody explains it to me, and then I will adopt it. And so I definitely have a much more skittish relationship with people knowing a lot about where I'm at or what I'm up to, right? I think part of that is being raised female and being told what people should know or not know, or what creates a dangerous environment for me or not, or if people know where I am or know that my house is empty, like what is that about? So I do think there's just sort of a culture of fear because of pervasive sexual violence just out in the world. So an example is that I probably never post when I'm out of town until I'm back because I don't want people to know nobody's at my house. Mm-hmm. Right? So I also was raised by an insurance agent for a father. Hi, Dad. And what is interesting, and this is what I think might be helpful for our listeners, is that you and I have decided we don't need one singular rule. So for example, I do a lot on my Instagram and my social media that includes my 3 nieces who are all young and young girls. I do a lot about my house renovation project. And I get nervous about what people are going to think right? I get nervous that people are going to see my nieces. I get nervous that people are going to wonder how I'm spending my money and having opinions about that, right? And so I think that brings this conversation all the way back to the meaning we make that is often unconscious. And so we have heard time and time again when folks are doing hiring or promotion, or folks are coming back from a weekend to work, asking some questions based on what they saw online. Like, hey, I saw you were at that show, or how was that trip with your mom? Or, congratulations, your kid won that spelling bee. Like, we actually learn about each other's lives outside of being sent personal updates about somebody's life, right? And I think it's interesting because as we negotiate boundaries and what do you want to talk about and not, and what does that look like, and also what does it mean?
So I think to come back to a point that you made, to really underscore for folks, like, why are we on Behave having a conversation about social media? Because culture always matters. So whatever our relationship to appropriate and inappropriate is, we start to project on to the way that we manage and show up at work. And I think after the break, it'd be really fun to layer on even deeper a conversation about race and gender and political correctness and how people evolve over time on issues and their experiences of identity. And what does that mean for what we see on social media when maybe an employee posts something that's outside of our organizational values?
We'll be right back.
Dear listener, did you know that Behave has been downloaded in 27 states in these United States of America and its colonies?
Oh my gosh, I hope that's all of the time zones.
I think we cover most of the time zones.
That'd be great.
Hi.
Hey, Levi.
Hey, guys.
Producer Levi's here today.
I'm on the microphone. I know it's a real violation.
It's exciting.
We also are in some other countries, but that's not what we're talking about right now.
Yes, so we are on a mission. We would love to have Behave downloads in all 50 states, plus the United States colonies of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands and Guam, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and all of the 50 states. Like we said, Producer Levi, how can folks do that? Help us achieve our goal.
I love a question that I can answer, and that is what you've brought to the table. The thing that we need folks to do is, one, if you have not already, go and post a review on iTunes yourself. We accept any of the options of 5 stars or higher on the review page. And then after you do that, reach out to at least one of your friends who is living out of state. Whatever state you're in, they should be in a different state, and say, hey, you should check out this podcast. Send them a link to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, that's great. And then on future episodes, we're going to give shout outs as people join this union of really listening and being a community of folks who are really committed to race and gender justice in the workplace. So I'll give a shout out. My friend Laura was tuning in from Washington State. She told me all about it.
And I'm going to give a shout out to Nodak Gamer, who gave us a 5-star review and left a couple comments about their experience of the podcast. And here's what I'm going to say. Friends of ours who see us in real life. The way the internet works is if you tell us in person how much you love the podcast, that makes us feel so great and warm inside. But we also need you to do it on the internet, on the whatever podcast service or app you use to listen to Behave. So help us hit our goal.
Go, do it now.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
So when I think about things like race, gender, disability, immigration status, education background, we know that there's biases that we're all walking around with, and a lot of them are fed to us. And so when I think how quickly I can go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in making an assumption about a whole person or their capability or what they care about or who they value or what kind of a coworker they're going to be based on tiny snippets of information that I'm seeing, right? And then as humans, if we're hardwired for story, we fill in the rest of the gap. And so I know that it is really important that it's illegal to ask somebody if they're pregnant when you are in the process of hiring, right? Because discrimination has been shown. Pregnancy is a temporary thing. And so this idea that somebody might lose out on a job opportunity because maybe they can't start for 3 months or something, right? There's a reason it's illegal. But if you're all over somebody's social media and you're seeing their birth announcement or you're seeing a party they're having with family to talk about their expanding family, it's tricky because people are getting access to information that you are not supposed to be taking into account to your decision making.
one of the things you just said was about sort of micro moments or tiny slivers of information.
Yeah.
And there's this exploding conversation about singular tweets or singular comments or singular posts or singular photos.
Right.
And depending on who the person is, I think we're reacting in different ways. So is it someone with a weapon and endangered species?
Yeah.
Is it homophobic jokes? Is it someone in blackface? Is it somebody doing some sort of gesture that harkens to sexual violence in some way? And I think employers are wrestling with, especially folks who have done values clarification work and who are thinking about or advancing a conversation around equity and inclusion related to race and gender. I think folks are really wringing their hands around what are we supposed to do when I come into contact with this information. It is obviously outside of our boundaries.
Yeah.
It is, or I shouldn't even say boundaries, I should say it's outside of our values, right? We're doing work around equity and inclusion in our workplace. And here's this moment, this information that I've just come across. And what am I supposed to do with that? And have we ever had a practice of holding people accountable around our values?
Right.
And then I think folks get really tripped up in like a free speech sort of place.
Sure.
And then a non-discrimination place where then they might say, well, if particular points of view are protected under a non-discrimination policy, then how could I ever hold someone accountable for having a different point of view? So I think people start to trip over themselves.
Yeah. Well, and going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier in the conversation around like Kevin Hart, around that hire for SNL, the challenge is that we have this historical record. So I think part of the thing I always think about is how old is this, whatever this is? And I think there's, for me, a boundary or a line or a difference between is this current or is this, have you grown, have you changed, is something different? What does that look like, right? And I think this is not about a clearly defined statute of limitations, as it were, of like, if it's more than 3 years old, it doesn't matter, or, right, like, that's not it. Like you said, context is everything. And so I think this is exactly at that intersection of the difference between equality and equity. Equality says just do the same thing, apply it to everybody. That's what the rule is, and that's fairness. And you and I know that's not real. So what is actually a way better choice is what is the whole context of what I know? What don't I know? What do I need to understand? What does it mean? Is there any cleanup to do? Because I think it also goes in the other direction too. Let's say you see somebody in a vacation photo wearing way less clothes than you would ask people to wear at work. Or you are learning about some of their hobbies, or that's how you learn that they actually have a side hustle or a second job, and that's how they're making more money. And you're like, I didn't even know they were out there doing that, right? So there are just surprises. And so I think what is going to be maybe satisfying and unsatisfying to our listeners today of Behave is that there both are and aren't any answers right now, because we're making it up as we go. Because again, we've just never had to be responsible for having this much access to information. And so I think rather than those hard and fast rules of you should just know better, you should assume everything's public and we'll follow you around forever, I feel like our medical friends have taught me something along the lines of our brains aren't even fully developed until you're 27. So yeah, 18-year-olds are doing some weird stuff, right? Folks who had different jobs, were in different communities, in different places, never thinking they'd be in this professional environment. Sure, on their profile, 3,000 pictures ago, there is a picture that surprises you. And again, this also isn't just an excuse of people are allowed to get away with everything because, oh, well, they didn't know any better, right? We do not ascribe to boys will be boys, or everybody just, uses that really offensive flag in that town. So of course that's in that photo. It's like, no, what is the context? What do I actually know about this real person sitting in front of me? What does that mean about what we need to do next?
So it's making me think of two things. One is sort of what are our specific boundaries or protocols that we have at Team Dynamics, and I think we could talk through those a little bit to illustrate the kind of conversation that folks might have as a team. The other thing that what you're saying makes me think of is a conversation around access. So I also think about who has had access at what points in their life to people who are tech savvy or social media savvy enough and sort of brand savvy enough and hiring savvy enough and management savvy enough to really coach them on how do you curate something. Yeah. So I think about all of the access that I have as a man, as someone that has class privilege, as someone that went to private schools, where the people around me, because of who I was and the institutions I was participating in, were invested in allocating resources to make sure that I, as a very young person, understood, before we even knew a lot about social media, they understood that there could be a professional or future implication. And so I had all of this information coming at me in training and coaching and support from other people who had access to resources. So I think there's a consideration of just because I'm seeing or not seeing something from someone doesn't mean there isn't a past there that they're not necessarily proud of. Right. That they may have had some sort of access to hiding or cleaning up or a strategy around their social media. So there's, I just think, an important reflection there that it's not apples to apples in the case of, well, if I were to look at two different employees and I see this one saying this and this one not saying this, it's like, I don't know that that person has never had that thought or intention. I just know that this one happened to not remove a forever ago post about something really terrible that they did or said.
Well, let's go into some do's and some don'ts, some of which feel like they're really concrete for us and other ones maybe feel like they're in motion. Sure. Right? So one, it's a do and a don't, because I think in double negatives a lot. So it's like, don't ever or always stop it. I think like that. It is important for me, given who I know myself to be, to not spend time stalking people who I work with on the internet. It doesn't make me feel closer to them. It's not information that I have that is going to change our work, the way we work together. And so for me, when I think about my goals of collegiality, excellence, efficiency, being in real and right relationship, for me personally, it doesn't bring me closer. Sometimes it means I miss out on stuff, right? So I don't know that somebody had a cool vacation that I should ask about, right? But for me, I know that I am not equipped yet to not make meaning of what I see. So I just don't spend time really going down the rabbit hole of the internet when it comes to the people I am in actual 3D relationship with.
I think there's an important conversation for folks to have with their teams. One is around sort of hard edges. So for us, every time we hire someone at Team Dynamics, we say we don't have a lot of rules around your activity on the internet. We have a couple. Yeah. So one of our hard edges is we don't talk trash about our clients on the internet. We have to say that because the truth is we see a lot of consultants, trainers, and facilitators talking really not as vague as I think they are about stuff that happens in a room that's hard for them. No question. I get crabby and irritated sometimes. That's about me. That's actually not about the people that were in the room. Right. So it is outside of our boundaries at Team Dynamics to, when we're crabby and irritated, to then spout off on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, if you have that, about our clients. And that's grounds for an invitation to not work here anymore. Yeah. And I think the other one is, considering we do race and gender work, that's another hard line for us too. So if we're seeing racism, sexism, homophobia promoted or actively reinforced by the behaviors of our employees, that's also a hard edge for us.
Right. I would say another thing we really talked about is consent is paramount, meaning we're really clear that you can choose to be all the friends is the word on Facebook, but connected, followers, TikTok, cousins. I don't know what that word is. You can all choose, I don't know. You can all choose to follow each other or whatever or not. So there's not a you're not allowed or there's not a you must. And also, right, to bring the culture that's below the surface above the surface, I will say, so that we don't jump to meaning making, it doesn't mean that I don't like or care about you. I know that you asked me to follow you on Instagram. I'm not going to. And I still really care about you and I'm excited that you're working here. So rather than just let it dangle out there, like, hey, maybe you forgot to click on that. I'm trying to connect to you, Trina. And I'm like, I know, I saw. No, thank you. So we actually say what it means so that it doesn't just linger out there, right? Where it must mean some of our colleagues are closer to each other than others if they're following or not following each other. And we're really clear that's not what the meaning is. Everybody gets to make a choice on every single platform who they do or don't want to be connected to. And I think consent, right, bleeds over into this conversation too. I also think a rule that's interesting is that people get to have their own rules. And so the fact that you and I don't have the same practice, we've discussed, that can feel uncomfortable sometimes because it's like, oh, I wish we felt the exact same way about everything all the time, but we don't. And that's really okay. So I hope that everybody listening today is hearing the context really matters. What are your goals? Of course, you're getting some information via the internet. Remember, it's a slice. It's not all the information. And so taking it with a grain of salt, but also remembering, just like we say about any other kind of self-awareness we teach at Team Dynamics, don't use it as an excuse or a weapon, right? Don't use information you're getting as a bludgeon to decide what it means about a whole relationship with somebody.
And I think this is one of those juicy topics that we'll probably want to come back to a couple of times because, one, I think we're coming at it from really, like you said, different vantage points and different experiences with it. And two, I think any number of the things that came up today, we could peel back and really dive into.
Yeah. I think that also this idea that this will be a ever-changing conversation because new platforms are going to come out that are surprising in new ways. So I think this is one of those conversations that it's important to keep alive rather than just have set it and forget it type rules. Don't follow me. I'm kidding.
We do want you to follow us on Twitter, so check us out at Team Dynamics LLC and tell us how you are having conversations about social media and boundaries in your workplace. Thanks for hanging out today. Make good choices.
Behave is produced by Levi Weinhagen in Studio G at the Glenn Nelson Center.
Come at me, bro.